It is really interesting that Apple is acquiring Intel's smartphone modem business.
And with that, we are live. And yes, that is one of the things we're going to talk about in this week's TechForge. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to TechForge episode 51. Okay, sorry about that. Had to take care of something else. So, this week we have a lot of interesting things to talk about. A whole bunch of AMD leaks. Nvidia releases their RTX 2080 Super to a less than stellar fanfare. And apparently, Apple is going to be acquiring a majority of Intel's smartphone modem business. So, and apparently, Microsoft is planning to change Windows 10 again. So,
Yep. It's going to keep happening, most likely.
so let's get right into it. We'll start with the Windows 10 story. This comes from express.co.uk, a news site out of the United Kingdom. But it is about Windows 10 and their planned release for the first half of 2020. So the May 2019 update came out, of course, in May. It's still rolling out to some people. Not everyone has gotten it quite yet. But the May 2019 update introduced a whole new host of improvements, including a new light mode and some important programs like Windows Sandbox. But they're saying that for the upgrade for the second half of the year, which is supposed to be called 19H2 and is expected to come out in October, that it's going to be pretty much an iterative improvement rather than a drastic change of any kind. However, they are saying that for the preview builds of the update they're calling 20H1 for first half of 2020, there's a few new features that are going to be added at the beginning of next year. First, they're going to be changing the way the interface is put together. In particular, they are going to be including a new option. Some of you may remember from Windows 7 days, and those of you who are still using Windows 7, the rounded corners that was available with the Arrow Glass design from Windows 7 and Windows Vista before it. Well, rounded corners could be making a comeback to Windows. Of course, Windows 8 and Windows 10 went for a very straight line and angular design interface. And actually, this particular image I'm going to share in just a second is from Tweaktown rather than express.co.uk, but it shows some of the design changes to the new Okay, let me go ahead and share the page here. So this is actually originally from Windows Central, but they have a video, which we will include a link to below, that shows what build 18947, which is what the current internal build at Redmond looks like. And you can see some of the design changes already in this build, just in this preview image. That's supposed to be the new start menu. Yeah.
Like that.
There's a few other things. Let's pause that because we don't want to get demonetized. Let's see. There was a few other things in the video. So right here, we get another view of what it looks like. Here, we get a view of... Oh, I'm sorry. That actually was the Cortana or search menu. Here is what the start menu looks like. Right here. Not that different from what we currently have, but I'm not sure what I think.
Well,
here we get a view.
Smaller.
They have Edge open in the background to kind of give you a view of what Windows look like. And so then they show like this random search results things and how you can add emojis. Anyway, we'll include a link to all of this. But the point being that they're going to be making some significant changes to the interface. And in addition to that, they're going to include customization for virtual desktops. This is a feature that's long been available in other operating systems, including Mac OS and Linux. But virtual desktops are relatively new to Windows. They came along with Windows 10. And not a lot of people use virtual desktops, it turns out. But I found that they can be quite useful if you want to, say, have one desktop where you have all your work stuff, and then another one where you keep all your gaming stuff, and then yet a third where maybe you have media and entertainment. And so that kind of division of labor can make things really easy to keep your various focuses. Another key feature that they're pushing is passwordless login. Now, I'm already seeing this in the current update, where they try to push you to put together a PIN to log in or to use Windows Hello facial recognition rather than a password. And so, all that to say, look out for more changes in the future to Windows 10. Particularly ones that... Go ahead.
I kind of think that just like with Windows, there was the Windows 7 shell that you can download and install and have Windows 7 start menu for Windows 10, even though that project was it's been a couple of years now, I think in the early 2000s, and Microsoft got smart to it and patched it and broke it basically. But I don't think that people would probably try to. I think that people would probably try to resurrect that kind of thing, where you can change if you don't like the Windows 10, the new Windows 10 start menu, somebody will try and make a installer package to change it to what you want. I mean, they did that within Windows 7, where you can change to a Windows XP theme.
Yeah, and there's already desktop customization apps like Rainmeter that exist where you can design your own links and your own desktop interfaces on top of the existing Windows interface.
Oh, okay.
I know I've used Rainmeter in the past because there's some really very nice desktop interface stuff you can do with Rainmeter that lets you customize, say, particular folders that you want to make sure are accessible from your desktop. Or if you want to have if you don't want to have performance monitor up all the time, you can use Rainmeter to have CPU, GPU, RAM, hard disk, all the metric stuff for your PC.
Oh, that's really cool. See some desktops that make it look similar to Linux.
Yep, that's one of the nice things about Rainmeter is although Windows is they don't like you messing with the desktop environment, Rainmeter does at least let you reconfigure the desktop however you see fit. One of my favorites used to be, they had one called the Pip-Boy skin, which you could make your desktop operate like the Fallout 3 Pip-Boy.
Wow. I see one I like on their website that where it has a background, like a background picture, but it's for your programs. You
Mm-hmm.
can click on any of the background characters, and they're for your programs. That's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah, see, I mean that's another thing that with anybody trying to lock down something, they'll try and make it their own or fix it or customize it. They're not exactly like Linux or Apple, to where they lock it down and lock it down, where you can't actually customize it.
All right. Well, speaking of not being able to lock down something, of course, in the current console generation, the PlayStation 4 became rather famous for the fact that you can upgrade its internal hard drive, whereas the Xbox One makes it more difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Western Digital has just released their brand new 1 terabyte gaming drive accelerated for the Xbox One. And so, according to Western Digital, the Gaming Drive Accelerated is compatible with the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X. And the 1 terabyte model is purportedly able to accommodate up to 25 games based on the average download size of a standard Xbox title. Apparently, in this external enclosure, the SSD accelerated, or the Gaming Drive Accelerated, excuse me, is capable of up to 400 megabytes per second read and write, which is pretty good for a USB device because that's essentially what this would be. And apparently it roughly measures 4 inches wide, 1.3 inches deep, and 5 inches tall, with a weight of roughly 0.24 pounds, so about a quarter of a pound. The problem lies in the price. The 500 gigabyte model is $120, and the 1 terabyte model is $220.
Mm.
So yeah, if you need SSD-like speeds for your Xbox One, more power to you. Me personally, I haven't ever really seen the need.
And the question I have is, pure console gamers probably don't know the speed of an SSD, so they won't really know how to gauge this. Those who
Well,
don't
yeah,
have a gaming desktop.
it's one of those things. I remember when the PS4 came out, and they touted that one of the things was you can swap out the hard drive and upgrade it yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And they did do some testing, and the SSD does notably decrease load and boot times.
Mm-hmm.
A perceivable amount. I think the standard hard drive was something like 58 seconds, if I remember the particular test I looked at, whereas the SSD was something like 23.
Yeah, yeah. And that market is where Seagate hybrid drives excelled, because they specifically made the hybrid drive for they made marketing and the hybrid drive for PlayStation 4 upgradability. because you could get like SSD like speed, which you did with the 8 gig cache, with a hard drive capacity with 500 gigs, 1 terabyte, even the 2 terabyte drive. Um, so, yeah, I'm glad that SSDs are getting into the console world. Um, it, it'll be interesting if they actually make a big enough impact to where console gamers will buy them.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Apparently, the upcoming Xbox Scarlet and the next iteration of the PS5 are supposed to come equipped with SSDs by default. But we don't know, we haven't heard much beyond that. However, there has been, I was going to save this originally for the AMD section that we normally talk about, but since this is related to the Xbox One, I think it's appropriate to bring it up to this point. There has been a leak of the new AMD system on chip called AMD Flute. And apparently, according to this leak from Komachi Insaka, who is a Taiwanese Twitter user who has in the past released some very reliable leaks about CPUs, released a CPU named AMD Engineering Sample 1000000000004 15 underscore 32 / 12 / 18 underscore 13 F9. Now, that big, long engineering sample name tells us a few things. Namely, that this is on the AMD Flute platform, which is not any of the known desktop platforms. It is on socket BL5, which we do know is the socket that is being designed for the Xbox and the PS5. The 8C16T tells us that it's going to have a base. It's going to be 8-core 16-thread with a base of 1.6 gigahertz and a boost of 3.2 gigahertz. And the 13F9 supposedly tells us this is using a Navi 10 GPU, supposedly named Navi 10 Lite.
Cool.
According to this leaker. And included with it was a showing from the user benchmark database, which supposedly showed, let me see if I can pull this up here. Oh. Oh, new Twitter interface you are. Well, you make things easy to read, but you're really hard to use. Okay, so here's the actual tweet. This was from the user benchmark database with the sample name and the information. And this apparently is the system memory latency ladder, and shows that there is a huge latency spike with L1, L2, L3 cache between 4 and 8 megabytes, which means that this is probably not using the 8 megabyte cache found in the current Zen 2 desktop CPUs. Indicates that maybe it's using a smaller cache, which would make sense given that this is for a console platform. So, with that said, it looks like Xbox, if this is indeed supposed to be the chip designed for the Xbox Scarlet, and that's considering that there is rumblings within the community that the AMD Flute SoC displayed here is supposed to be the Xbox Scarlet new system on chip, we could be looking at some very interesting days ahead. All right, keeping things going. Let's see. Ah, yes. So this was an interesting one when it broke yesterday. When we're recording this, it was yesterday. Corsair has confirmed that it has acquired PC gaming company Origin PC. Yes, you heard that correctly. Corsair, the PC accessory and peripheral maker, as long with the maker of some excellent cases, all-in-one water coolers, and yes, what they're classically known for, RAM, has purchased
And
an
also,
entire... Go ahead.
and also now their custom liquid cooling kit, Corsair
Hydro X.
Hydro X.
So yeah, and now they have their own boutique PC builder after acquiring Origin PC. And so this is from Tweaktown, and they say, quote, the acquisition of Origin PC will see the custom PC maker integrate Corsair's IQ software ecosystem into their family of PCs, offering up system-wide lighting synchronization and performance monitoring. Better yet, the new Corsair Hydro X series custom cooling will be making their way into Origin PC systems in the near future. Andy Paul, founder and CEO of Corsair, said, with the gaming PC market continuing to expand as an increasing number of players make the jump from console to PC, we want to do more to reach customers in North America that prefer to buy rather than build their systems. While Origin PC with Origin PC's expertise in personalized custom gaming systems and Corsair's strength in performance PC hardware and the IQ software ecosystem, we're excited to combine our efforts to create new world-class gaming experiences for PC gamers. And so, according to the details of the acquisition, Origin PC is going to remain a separate brand within Corsair and will continue to operate from their offices in Miami, Florida. All existing Origin PC warranties, purchases, and supports are unaffected and will continue to be provided. Corsair will continue to offer its own branded range of systems, including the Vengeance, Corsair One, and Corsair One Pro. And basically, they're going to remain separate entities. It's just that Corsair now owns Origin PC. So keep that in mind for next time you're looking at a pre-built. Okay. So Hunter, do you think we should do the AMD news, the Intel news, or the Nvidia news first?
Keep the Nvidia news to the end.
Okay.
I would say just like it is.
All right. Well, let's jump straight into the AMD news then, because there is quite a bit of it. So we kind of already hit on the fact about AMD is working on some new SoCs for both the Xbox Scarlet and the PS5. That's not really new news, but AMD also seems to have a problem with its head-in board partners for its motherboards in that they're not following the script. So
2 more.
Yes, we have 2 more. So last week it was just Asus, but now we have BioStar and MSI doing the same thing. They are all enabling PCIe Gen 4 support on their 400 series motherboards.
They are pretty much picking a fight unintentionally or I don't know, but it seems like they're. It kind of seems like they're picking a fight with AMD by adding this support, or
Well,
unintentionally.
I mean, there are some restrictions. Namely, you have to have a Ryzen 3000 processor for it to work.
Yeah.
It has to be a 400 series chipset. And with BioStar in particular, they're doing it on a very specific subset of their 400 series chipsets. In particular, there are 4 motherboards receiving the PCIe Gen 4 support BIOS updates. The AB45C-M4S, also known as the B450H or B450MH. The AB35G-M4S, also known as the B45M2. The AX47A-A4T, branded as the X470 GT8, and AX47A-I4S, also branded as the X470 GTN. So you can download the BIOSes for all those BioStar motherboards I just mentioned, and if you have a Ryzen 3000 processor, you can get PCIe 4 running on them.
I wonder if how the temperatures are going to affect that. Because we see on the X570 boards that the PCIe, at least for the M.2, has like a huge cooler, huge heat sink.
That is true, but the thing to remember is that a lot of the heat generated by the X570 chipset is due to the RAID controller that's built in.
Yeah.
Particularly
So
the
if you're
RAID
not
controller
rating,
designed for the multiple NVMe drives.
right. So then if you're not rating NVMe drives, uh, which X470 has 2 or 3 M.2 slots, then it shouldn't be much of a temperature issue.
It really shouldn't be.
That'd be fun to see a PCIe 4 M.2 at like 4,000 megahertz. No, not megahertz. Gigabits per second. It's like 4 point something gigabits per second. That would be. I don't know if there'd be much. Be like a 5-second boot time or something, possibly.
I'm not sure, but considering the boot times with Windows 10, even on a SATA SSD, are usually on the order of 5 to 10 seconds, I'm not sure how much faster NVMe could even make it.
Yeah. I mean, I have Windows 10 on an NVMe drive, um, and my computer boots in probably like 5 or so seconds. That is so much nicer than the previous boot times years ago of 2 minutes.
Oh yeah,
Go get popcorn and your computer's up.
when I have to go back to a computer that has just a hard drive in
Back
it,
in the day.
particularly when it's Windows 7 or earlier, man, those wait times are painful.
And when the hard drive is 5,400 RPM. And
Mm-hmm.
when the hard drive is 5,400 RPM.
Yep.
Times have changed.
This is indeed true.
And speaking of that, MSI.
Yes. MSI has brought their Ryzen 300 and 400 series motherboards up to support for Ryzen 3000. And I will share this list from Tom's Hardware because it's easier than just reading them all off. So, MSI has announced 10 revised AMD 300 and 400 series motherboards that will come with support for AMD's Ryzen 3000 series processors right out of the box. You can tell these new boards from the originals by their max suffix. So, notice something very interesting here. A320 was not supposed to have Ryzen 3000 support at all. but
Yeah.
MSI includes it on the A320M-A Pro Max. So I thought that was interesting.
APUs. That'd be good for the APUs.
Oh, yes. I saw, I think it was yesterday, Tech Yes City took an A320 board and dropped a Ryzen 5 3600X on it. Worked just fine.
Wow.
Let's see. MSI is also including the B450M-A Pro Max. Well, all the ones you see listed there. Of biggest import in this case is this one, the B450 Tomahawk Max.
Yeah, that's a good
The
board.
B450 Tomahawk is widely regarded in the tech community as one of the very best motherboards for B450.
Mm-hmm. For an ATX form factor.
Correct. If you're wanting an MATX, the mortar is the way to go.
Yeah, the mortar's really good. That's what I have. Of course, the non-Max, but the mortar is what I have in my current computer.
So they also mentioned that the new Max motherboards will be featuring 32 megabyte BIOS chips. And so they'll be able to restore the snazzy Click BIOS 5 interface and RAID functionality that originally had to be cut on X470 and B450. Because originally they had 16 megabyte BIOS chips. And so, apparently, these motherboards can now support memory speeds up to 4133 megahertz.
Dang.
So, anyway, if you're looking to buy a new motherboard and you don't want to pay the price premium for X570, then look for some of these MSI B450 and X470 motherboards. Like we said, the B450M Mortar Max and the B450 Tomahawk Max are probably some of your best options. So, with that, let's keep rolling. Ah, yes. So this is a leak report that comes from WCCF Tech. So, obviously, take all leak reports with a grain of salt. But apparently, third and fourth generation AMD Ryzen Threadripper CPUs have been spotted in the wild. The first is another user benchmark leak. This one for a 16-core, 32-thread engineering sample with the code name Castle Peak. Now, the Castle Peak code name is important because that is the one that is supposed to be the successor to the previous generations of Threadripper. Apparently, this chip was running at a base clock of 3.6 gigahertz, a boost clock of 4 gigahertz, meaning that it'll have 100 megahertz higher base clock, or 100 megahertz higher, sorry. Yeah, it has, so Castle Peak compared to the 2950X, which remember, has the same number of cores and threads, will apparently feature 100 megahertz higher base clock, but a 400 megahertz lower boost clock based on what they're showing here. And again, they're saying this is an engineering sample. And they do some number crunching here in the WCCF Tech article. Of course, they're being speculative, but they say on average, based on what they're seeing, that there's an overall performance uplift of roughly 11%, with the engineering sample being 11% faster than the 2950X and 18% faster when comparing multi-core performance. Basically, it seems that this Castle Peak engineering sample performs on par with the Ryzen 9 3900X, which we would expect it to. It's the same generation, the same architecture, the same number of cores and threads. Of course, it should perform similarly. Now, apparently, there have been two code names as well that have appeared for Zen 3, that is Threadripper 4th generation, CPUs. So these two code names originally appeared in the IDA64 database. And they are, quote, AMD Family 19H models 00H-0H, codename Genesis, and AMD Family 19H models 20H-2H, Vermeer. Now, the 20H-2H, according to WCCF Tech, refers to Zen 3 in general, similar to how Summit Ridge was the code name for 1st Gen Ryzen, and Whitehaven was the code name for 1st Gen Threadripper. But the second one, Genesis, is believed to refer to 4th generation Ryzen Threadripper. They mentioned that Zen 3 is supposed to bring in multiple new features such as PCIe 5.0, DDR5, and most notably the implementation of quad thread SMT, simultaneous multi-threading, meaning each core can now handle up to 4 threads at the same time. So instead of having, a 16-core 32-thread like you would with the Ryzen 9 3950X, then you could have 16 cores but up to 64 threads with this quad thread SMT implementation. And obviously, with the move to PCIe 5.0 and DDR5, there's most likely going to be a socket change for Threadripper. And that's not terribly surprising. I mean, AMD originally announced with the Zen CPUs back in 2017 that they would support socket AM4 and subsequently socket TR3 up until 2020. And considering these would be released sometime in the 2020 to 2021 timeframe, it makes sense that they would wait until then to move to a new socket. Okay. Anything else to add?
Nope.
All right, then. Moving right along. This next story comes from TechRadar. AMD admits its Radeon RX 5700 series price cuts were a trap for Nvidia. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. I understand that AMD has kind of made the narrative about their Radeon RX 5700 series that, the whole prices that we showed at E3 were intended to get Nvidia to launch the supers at a higher price so that we could lower them later. I don't know how much I buy that. But this is from Matt Hansen at TechRadar. So, what they say, while many people assumed AMD cut prices in reaction to NVIDIA's launch, according to Scott Herkelman, AMD's Vice President and General Manager for the Radeon division, the price cut was pre-planned in a bit to get NVIDIA to overprice its new graphics cards. Mm-hmm. This came out in an interview between Herkelman and Hot Hardware. And so, according to Herkelman, AMD had a hunch that NVIDIA's large die size on its Turing boards would mean the company would struggle to cut prices without impacting its margins. We know that they have a tremendous burden on their gross margins because their die size is big. And so we just gameplayed suggested retail prices. And so basically, AMD is trying to say that they, to quote one of their engineers, debated Nvidia into higher prices for the RTX Super Series. Now, whether you want to believe that or not, I leave that up to you. It is hard to argue, though, that the price cuts by AMD did anything but help their position in the stack. The RX 5700 XT at its original launch price of $449 was all right, but you lower that price $50 to $399, and suddenly you have a much more interesting proposition. And, a $400 card then being remarketed at $350 also makes a huge difference for the 5700 non-XT. So, whichever you choose to believe, whether you think AMD managed to debate Nvidia into overpricing their super cards, or if AMD simply reacted to Nvidia's card prices and made the price cuts accordingly, I'll leave that to your imagination. Suffice it to say, the current prices for the RX 5700 XT and RX 5700 make them the card under $700 if you want performance and don't care about ray tracing. Okay. Oh, there was one other quote here. I almost forgot. AMD certainly seems to be enjoying it, referring to their supposed trap. It's been so much fun these last couple of weeks just playing that out. It's just fun to finally win. I think that does kind of tip AMD's hand there a little bit. They know that Nvidia has been shellacking them in the market for some time. So to pull off a win like this, whether it's manufactured or not, certainly doesn't hurt. Okay. So I've included an article here as well. This is from Steve Walton over at TechSpot. Most of you probably know him better as Steve from Hardware Unboxed, the YouTube channel. Yes, they are related. Technically, Hardware Unboxed is independent from TechSpot, but the written versions of his videos, or the article versions of his videos, usually wind up on TechSpot. And that includes the recent test he did with the RX 5700 XT under an EK vector water block.
Yeah.
And so he found out a number of things. Number one, his particular RX 5700 XT is not a terribly good overclocker. That said, under this water block, he was still able to push the 5700 XT past 2.1 gigahertz. Now, to me, that's significant because this is the first time we've ever heard of an AMD card going over the 2 gigahertz barrier. Now, admittedly, Nvidia cards have been doing that for a while. This is the first time we've ever seen an AMD product breaking 2 gigahertz. Let's see. Let me share this photo with our audience. This shows what the EK vector block on the RX 5700 XT looks like. Notice they've got it filled here with the tubes and how the liquid flows through. the GPU block itself. And they also show some photos from Steve's example where he had it put together. The header image at the top is particularly nice. And the reason I include this is because Steve does a huge number of benchmarks. And while he does get a fairly significant performance improvement, ultimately, it's not really enough to push it over the top over, say, the RTX 2080. Also do some total system power tests. Apparently, pushing Navi past 2.1 gigahertz kind of kills the efficiency of the card. That's not really anything new for AMD products. AMD generally releases their products right on the edge between maximum performance and efficiency. So you can see the stock RX 5700 XT pulls 370 watts of power total system, whereas overclocked and water cooled, it pulls almost 100 more watts of power. But again, that is total system power draw. If we look at just GPU load, though, the RX 5700 XT pulls 186 watts in its stock configuration and 258 in its overclocked one. Now, admittedly, that's not quite RX Vega levels of power increase, but that's significant enough that it can't be ignored. Now, that said, Steve does point out here, the RX 5700 and 5700 XT are right up there with the RX Vega 56 in their cost per frame metric. The RX Vega 56 gets about $3.33 per frame, but the 5700 and the 5700 XT are both there right around $3.75, 76, 77 cents per frame, making them the best bang for your buck in the under $500 category. So, anyway, that gives us an idea of how the RX 5700 XT stacks up. And you may have noticed that there were some numbers there as well for another card that we'll talk about in just a few. The RTX 2080 Super. But, well, there's a reason that we say the RX 5700 XT is the best bang for the buck under $700. Yeah. Hunter, you still there?
Yep.
Okay. Your screen froze up for me on this end for a few seconds. All right. That gets us through the AMD news. Hunter, you're the one who brought this one to my attention about Apple, and it's kind of what we led the show with. So why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I saw that that Apple is acquiring a majority of Intel's smartphone modem business. Intel, in the article, Intel noticed that their smartphone business is losing revenue, so they're not really making enough money off of it, and so Apple, of course, with their iPhones, can take that over, and instead of using the A chips of their own design, they can start using Intel's mobile chips or modems.
Yeah, because I believe currently they're having to use Samsung, if I remember correctly.
And it also, yeah. And so, uh, 2,200 Intel employees will be joining Apple. And this transaction is valued at $1 billion and is expected to close in fourth quarter of 2019. So September, November, December.
Yeah, so this is
Hopefully
actually
that's
looks
a
like
good change for the. Hopefully it's a good change for the employees.
I certainly hope so, and it looks like it's going to close in late 2019. So
Yep.
that's pretty quick, and that's going to put Apple in hold of over 17,000 wireless technology patents. That's that's
It's
not an
nuts.
insignificant number.
Nope. Intel will retain the ability to develop modems for non-smartphone applications such as PCs, Internet of Things devices, and autonomous vehicles. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, Apple's not going to be interested in most of those other things, at least not in the near
Yeah,
future. And so
and
that's probably why they're letting Intel retain those. Their interest is solely in how can we make the iPhone better.
yes, and they're searching. It says the agreement enables us to focus on developing technology for 5G networking while retaining critical intellectual property and modem technology that our team has created, and that is from Intel CEO Bob Swan. Everybody's
Neat.
trying to go up to 5G.
Yeah. 5G is supposed to be rolling out here in the next couple of years, although there
Yep.
are some concerns about some of the microwave technology it uses.
Mm. I know it's going to expand Bluetooth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to make Bluetooth range a lot wider, and you'll be able to pinpoint uh, people with Bluetooth devices a lot better um, for like location data and navigation, of course.
Right.
Um, what I heard is if you're in like a stadium building, you'll be able to have like a Bluetooth GPS device, and you'll be able to find a coworker in somewhere far away in the building with pinpoint precision of where they actually are, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. The proposed improvements to Bluetooth and to 5G triangulation of position is interesting, if slightly disturbing.
Right, right. The awesome aspect of it is getting better. The scary aspect of kind of like Big Brother will be able to find where you are at all times. You better not stray away from your post.
Right.
Uh, I was only gone for 5 minutes. Uh huh. Bluetooth says otherwise.
Right. All right. So our next little story from about Intel. This comes from PC Games In. Finished Intel Comet Lake 10-core CPU samples are heading out for qualification testing. So,
Good.
according to PC Games In, there was a new 10-core Intel Comet Lake development kit that has appeared in the EEC database. And so, According to their source, this is supposed to be a Comet Lake development kit, which admittedly would make this 14 nanometer plus,
Plus, yeah.
and wouldn't arrive in desktops until 2020. But with a hardware qualification kit, it means that we could see a more mainstream Intel Deca Core CPU as early as the latter part of this year.
Yeah, also from what I read about this is for the originally for laptops, and because of Ryzen 3000, they're trying to push it to desktops as quick as possible to match or compete with Ryzen 3000. But it's still stuck at like everybody that I'm in three PC building enthusiasts Facebook groups, and everybody's laughing that they're still stuck at 14 plus plus plus, and they're making jokes of, well, they're going to be at 14 nanometer plus 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 for X amount of more years. So it's fun watching. Um, it's fun being in those groups and seeing the feedback of the community, seeing the news and seeing the struggles. It sucks that Intel's having struggles, but it's really nice to see that AMD is coming into being on top.
Well, I mean, Intel has the money to throw around. They
True,
have the engineers to throw around. The
true.
problem is that their process technology has just, for some reason, 10 nanometer has been an albatross around their neck. I mean, I remember reading way back in the Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge days how 10 nanometer was supposed to be here by 2015 and then 7 nanometer
Yeah,
after it, by
yeah.
2017. Well, 2015
Not
came
fair.
and went, and we only got down to 14 nanometer.
Yep.
And so then it was supposed to be 10 nanometer in 2017. And then that didn't happen. And so now at this point, I almost feel sorry for Intel that their
Yeah.
10 nanometer node has been this abysmal for them. At the same time, it has given AMD the chance it needed to recover and produce a compelling and competitive processor in Ryzen.
Oh yeah. Especially being stuck in the bulldozer and pile driver days.
Yeah, I remember the initial bulldozer and pile driver hype.
Yeah.
Uh, at the time, I was running my Phenom 2X6 1055T that I had overclocked to 3.4 gigahertz. And I was thinking, man, I can't wait to have an 8-core processor. And then I saw the performance numbers where the 8150 was actually slower than my 1055T in some
Wow.
tasks. And I was really disappointed. Now, admittedly, that a lot of that was corrected with the 8300 series, but even
Yeah.
then, the writing was still on the wall that Bulldozer and its derivatives were just not quite what we had been expecting.
And the power consumption and the heat production, even with the 900, or the 9000 series, 9350, it comes with, like, I know one of the 9000 series, because I have an 8320 and was thinking of going to the 9000 series, but even that came with a liquid cooler, which
Yeah,
was
the 9590.
insane. Yeah, insane.
And it,
It's cool that it came with a liquid cooler, but whoa, that's a lot of heat. I mean, AMD is already known, or at least previously known, to be, hey, if your house is hot, is cold, and it's in winter, just fire up your AMD computer and you'll get an instant heater.
Yeah, deserved or not, it did have that reputation throughout the
And
bulldozer
jet
years.
engine. And also jet engine noise.
Yeah, and it's funny to see the tables almost turning with how hot some of the Intel chips in the 9000 series run.
Oh yeah. Like overheating a MacBook Pro. That's pretty insane.
Well, admittedly, that wasn't all Intel's fault. A lot of
Right.
that was Apple designing an inadequate cooling solution or trying to take a previous cooling solution and very lightly upgrade it in a way that
Yeah.
was not sufficient to handle that CPU.
Right.
Now, we do know that Intel is coming out with their Sunny Cove cores on mobile toward the end of this year. And that is their first non-Skylake derivative architecture since 2016. But Sunny Cove is not due out on the desktop for quite some time. So the question becomes, what can we expect out of a 10-core, 14-nanometer Skylake derivative CPU going up against the 16-core Ryzen on Zen 2? Or, well, technically, if you want the same price point, the R9 3900X, which is 12 cores, 24 threads, would be going up at right around the same price. So it's good to see that Comet Lake is finally making its ways into testers' hands. But hopefully that kind of information will help to dispel stuff like this next story. This is from Gordon Maung over at PC World. He says, yeah, about that Ice Lake demolishing Ryzen 9 thing. He basically says, quote, those headlines proclaiming Intel's mobile 10th gen has already body slammed Ryzen 9, take a chill pill. That's literally his first sentence. Or more properly, that's his subtitle for the article. Basically, he says that these leaked benchmarks should be taken with a significant grain of salt. He says, as always before a CPU launch, the inevitable leaked benchmarks make the rounds. The internet found itself hyperventilating this week over the thought of a tiny mobile 15 or 28 watt Ice Lake Core i7 1065G7 mercilessly pummeling a big desktop 105 watt Ryzen 9 3900X. The leaked score was apparently run on a HP Spectre X36013 and then uploaded via Geekbench's online database. So they talked about how this is a 4-core processor and that it is multi-threaded, but they point out that the uploaded benchmark score on Geekbench showed a single-threaded score of 5,691, compared to the 3900X's 5,624. They did their own testing, though, which I will show. Give me just a moment. Let me expand this. So they did their own testing. This is in Geekbench 4.04, and it is single-threaded performance. They have the 9900K at 6,388, the Ryzen 9 3900X at 5,978, the Core i7 9880H Coffee Lake at 5,595, the leaked Core i7 numbers for Ice Lake at 5,566, and the previous generation Core i7 8565U at 5,248. In other words, Well, when compared to actual real-world results, this seems a bit not quite as a win for this CPU. They said, quote, or Gordon says, quote, "We don't know how most news stories automatically assign the Ryzen 9 3900X the lower 5624 score. We should also note that single-threaded performance in short benchmark runs, where most of the CPUs can boost from 4.0 to 4.8 gigahertz, tends to be very close anyway. Multi-threading or processing very heavy and long-running tasks are what truly separate the chips." And so, we're basically saying that trying to pit a 10th gen Core i7 mobile CPU against a desktop Ryzen 3000 using leaked benchmarks is just not worth much debate.
No.
That said, they think that if what Intel is claiming is true about this release for Ice Lake, they're claiming an 18% efficiency increase over the 8th gen chips, then it's probably going to perform just fine. Just don't expect a mobile CPU to be able to crush a desktop part.
That doesn't really sound like a good test anyways, because they're two different specs and everything.
Yeah, there's that.
Two different use cases.
I mean, Geekbench tries to take those kind of things into account, but again, we don't know where the 5624 score came from. That's just somehow the score that was assigned to the Ryzen 9 3900X, even though we saw in Gordon's own testing that it got a significantly higher score of nearly 6,000.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. I'm sure Intel's Ice Lake processors will do just fine in the mobile space. The 8000 and 9000 series have all been solid, and they have huge market share in the mobile space over AMD's Ryzen. Although, admittedly, there's some good deals out there on Ryzen PCs and on Ryzen in general. But I'm getting off topic again. This next one, I'm not going to talk about it much, but it's, if you don't read any of the other articles in this week's show notes, read this one, because this is from a non-tech, and it's Dr. Ian Cutress. We've talked about Ian Cutress in the past. He does excellent work over on a non-tech when it comes to analysis work. And this is an interview he had with Intel fellow Guy Therian. Now, Guy is an engineer at Intel who works, and they discuss thermal design power, turbo boost states, and overclocking. And if you want to get a better understanding of how Intel gives processors the thermal design power, or TDP, they do, read this article, because it is eye-opening, some of their choices and decisions. Part of it is that how they define TDP is how the CPU runs day to day, not necessarily at its highest clocks. They also talk about how turbo states work. So they say this about, or Guy says this about TDP. TDP is an average power dissipation at a maximum junction temperature operating condition limit, specified in Intel's engineering data sheet for that processor, for which the processor is validated during manufacturing and when executing an associated Intel-specified high-complexity workload at that frequency. So, and then, they go into great detail about what that workload looks like, how that stresses the turbo states, and what that means for how to test thermal design power in the future. But they also specify that there can be up to a 10% variability from the TDP that is quoted across CPU samples. And so, they also talk about the difference between the power limit 1 and power limit 2 states when it comes to thermal design power and turbo boost states. And also discuss kind of how overclocking should work and be considered, and how to test those kind of ideas, or how to test functioning for TDP, turbo clocks, and overclocking. So it is a very fascinating interview. It goes into a lot more depth and detail than would probably be suitable for this show. But it is a fascinating look into how Intel rates TDP, how they choose the turbo and boost states they do, and what their philosophy is toward overclocking. So very much encourage it. The link is going to be down in the description. Just hit that one tab link and it'll have a link to all the articles we talk about in tonight's show. All right. Hunter had to step away for a moment, so we'll continue with the Nvidia GeForce RTX 2080 Super review. So the Nvidia GeForce RTX 2080 Super, if you've been keeping track in some of the PC tech press, you would see that the RTX 2080 Super kind of entered the scene with a collective meh. Gamers Nexus even went so far as to say, quote, "No, we're not doing a review of the RTX 2080. If you want to know what the numbers look like, take an RTX 2080, add about 8%, and that's the RTX 2080 Super." AnandTech doesn't quite go that far, but their review is fairly thorough. They point out that the RTX 2080 Super is not that much, is very, very similar to the base RTX 2080, and that in general, the main thing it brings to the table is faster GDDR6 memory with 15.5 gigabits per second memory clock versus the 14 on the RTX 2080. And that otherwise, it's almost identical. So, like I said, what kind of performance improvement does that bring? Well, as I said, the answer is not as much. This is from the closing thoughts of the AnandTech article. To be sure, the RTX 2080 Super is the smallest performance jump of any of the Super cards. While the other cards delivered around 15% better performance per dollar than their vanilla predecessors, the RTX 2080 Super is only about half that at 8%, which is enough to be meaningful and enough to justify a new SKU, especially with the hardware changes, but it's not a card that changes the video card calculus significantly. Instead, it's exactly what it says on the tin. A slightly faster 2080, delivering a bit more performance and performance per dollar than it did before. So, this isn't just us being you know, we've been accused before of saying, "Oh, we're just AMD shills. We're, we just don't like Nvidia." Admittedly, there are things about Nvidia's business practices I don't like. There are things about AMD business practices I don't like. That said, Nvidia's actions with the RTX series I have been critical of from day one. And the RTX 2080 Super does not do a whole lot to allay that. It's still a classic. You pay the early adopter tax, and then we're going to swap it out for a more powerful card less than 12 months after launch. So, yeah, I thought that was kind of scummy, particularly for people who had just recently bought an RTX 2070 or 2080. And so, this kind of collective meh that the RTX 2080 Super launched to kind of served to take it out of the spotlight pretty quickly. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I am nearing the end of my wakeful usefulness. So, let's take a look at these hardware deals real quick, shall we? Again, links down below in the description to everything that you have seen here. All right, so let me share our hardware deals for this week. The first one, Hunter, you found this one.
Yep.
It's the Sovereign 1TB Rocket NVMe PCIe SSD. It is an M.2 SSD. It is a 1TB capacity for $109.98, straight from Amazon.
Yep, it said it was on sale on a PC gaming website, I think, or something, but this looks to be a standard new price, not a temporary deal. And the speeds are actually not that bad. I think it's at least 3,000 megabits per second read and write.
I was going to say, I don't think they listed here. But we do, yeah, they show some customer images. This is from Crystal Diskmark. Notice that is a QDEP 32, which is not realistic for day-to-day usage, but still, read speeds of nearly 3,100 megabytes per second and write speeds of over 1,000 megabytes per second.
But looking it up, one moment.
So yeah, here's their claimed speeds. And again, this is according to Crystal Diskmark. As a general rule, Crystal Diskmark is kind of a best case scenario benchmark, as is Atto. You'd really need to hammer it with something like AS SSD to get a clearer picture, but even still, you're talking, they claim read and write speeds of 3,400 megabytes per second and 30,000 megabytes per second writes.
Yeah. I had to look that up to confirm it. Yeah. But still, the main thing I saw in this is it's a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD M.2 for basically 110. That's cheaper than what I've seen for 30 around 3,000 megabits per second. That's what I've seen I've seen other M.2 NVMe's for a little more, like 129.99. Seen them for 147. Really depends on the name brand, but this is a pretty good SSD.
Yeah, we've
And
talked
they
about.
are, and Sovereign is known for making adapters. I have their, because my Western Digital Blue SATA M.2 did not fit in the SATA or NVMe socket on my motherboard for some unknown reason. The screw would not screw in. I bought a Sabrent drive where it makes a M.2 into a 2.5-inch SSD.
Nice.
Yep.
So, yeah, and we've talked about in the past. The other really good deal in 1 terabyte NVMe drives right now is the Intel 660p.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, the 660p is about $15 cheaper at about $95, but
Right.
its performance is roughly a third of this drive's.
Yes.
At that,
So if you need the space, if you don't really need the speed, like at least 3 gigabits per second, if you don't need that speed, like if you're using for a boot drive or a storage drive for games, I would definitely go with the 660p because it's cheaper and you're still getting 1 terabyte. But this one is good if you need a faster drive.
I mean, I'll be honest. If the price difference is only $15 and I can get 3 times the performance for that additional $15, I'm
Yeah.
probably spending that $15.
Oh yeah.
But understandably, not everyone has that choice. And so
Right.
if you don't, I can understand why. All right, and that brings us to the other hardware deal for this week. And this is one I'm probably going to get myself because I've been looking for a 144 hertz 1080p gaming monitor for a while. And I wanted one with FreeSync, and I wanted one at a good price. And this fits all those options. This is the ViewSonic VX2458-MHD. This is a 24-inch 1080p, 1 millisecond response rate, 144 hertz gaming monitor with FreeSync and a flicker-free blue light filter. And also has connectors for HDMI and DisplayPort. And so you notice this is a ViewSonic. It does have kind of that red gamer aesthetic in the stand. Of course, they have to plug each of the features: 1 millisecond response time, 144 hertz refresh rate, FreeSync. Is a 24-inch class monitor, so
Comfortable
it's 23.
gaming.
I'm sorry.
Comfortable gaming
uh,
with the
the
flicker free
yeah, the flicker free
technology.
is kind of a big deal. The one thing you lose on this monitor versus others of its style and type is specifically this monitor does not have swivel or pan. It has tilt only.
Ah,
But if you're looking for an inexpensive 144 hertz gaming monitor, you'd be hard pressed to find one for $140.
yeah.
I mean, at that price point, it's hard to find 75 or 100 hertz monitors. To find a 144 hertz monitor, even with this relatively low end stand, is nothing short of impressive. They demonstrate some of the tilt functionality here, but absolutely. If you are looking for an inexpensive 144 hertz 1080p gaming monitor, this is one of the best deals I've seen on one. Now, no, it doesn't have G-Sync. It has FreeSync. And yes, it's only a 24-inch monitor, but it's $140.
Yeah, and it's not 27-inch, which is what I have, but the 27-inch, I just looked it up, and there's not a there's not a Amazon selling price for it. It's going by other sellers, and so it's more expensive. I would say that this is a good deal to get if you're wanting to experience 144 hertz FreeSync gaming. And this might possibly work with your Nvidia card. It'd be best to look it up first and see if other people have bought it, and to see if it works with Nvidia's qualifications for G-Sync compatible.
Correct. And of course, no, you're not going to get all the G-Sync Ultimate features, but at this price point, I don't think most people are going to be worried about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we have reached the end of our show once again. So, what do you think of what you've seen in this week's episode? Do you think it's a good thing that Apple is buying out some of Intel's smartphone modem business? In fact, most of it? What about the release about Xbox Scarlet? Do you think that's the CPU that's going to wind up in the new console? Or how about all those AMD leaks? Do you think they're legit? Give us a comment down below and let us know what you think. Also, of course, you can also find links down below to all of our social media for CrossForge Gaming, to links to our twitch.tv channel, as well as the community Facebook group, our Discord, and where you can find us over on Twitter. So, Hunter, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Nope. Not at this point.
Well, all right. Well, in that case, again, we thank you for sitting through us once again talking about tech. We hope you've enjoyed it. Give us a like. And if you want to see more stuff like this, of course, hit that notification bell. Yes, I know, the cringy YouTuber stuff to say, but turns out calls to action actually work. So,
Yep.
I've been Ned. He's been Hunter. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you. And forge on.
Forge on.